The winter morning in Boston was a bit brighter than usual. Carol Bradshaw gazed at the snow-covered view of Beacon Hill from the window of her spacious office. Her advertising agency, Creative Vision, had become a notable presence in the industry in just 3 years. When Carol quit her small advertising firm and decided to go independent, many people laughed at her choice, calling it madness. Especially her family. "Mom, we're going to be late." Carol snapped back to reality at the sound of her 11-year-old son Aiden's voice. His thick brown hair was disheveled from the morning rush, and he had a blue backpack slung over his shoulder. His eyes strongly resembled those of her ex-husband, Jason. "Sorry, honey, I'll be right there." Carol signed the last proposal on her desk and headed toward her son. Her daily life was like walking a tightrope, constantly balancing between her two worlds, successful career woman and single mother. Even after 3 years since the divorce, maintaining that balance wasn't easy. "Today's a special day," Carol said as she gently fixed Aiden's hair. "I'm closing a deal with a major client." Aiden looked up at his mother and smiled proudly. "You'll do great, Mom." She felt her heart warm at her son's pure trust. Aiden had always been on her side, even during the bitter atmosphere of the divorce. On the other hand, Carol's parents, Betty and Richard, and her sister Ashley were different. They decided that Carol was entirely to blame for the divorce and took Jason's side.
Do you know some people earn over $10,000 a month just by posting Reddit stories on YouTube? No face, no voice, just a laptop. I do it 2 link below if you're curious.
A son-in-law who claimed to put family first suited their values better than a daughter who prioritized her career. "Well, let's get you to school," Carol said, just as her smartphone rang. The screen displayed "Mother," and she hesitated for a moment. "Hello?" "Carol, it's been a while," her mother Betty's voice sounded softer than usual. "Have you made plans for Thanksgiving yet?" Carol frowned. She had only maintained minimal contact with her parents for 3 years. Being invited for Thanksgiving was unexpected. "I haven't decided yet." "I'd like you and Aiden to come," Betty continued. "Your father and Ashley say they want to reconcile as a family." Carol was silent. She couldn't believe that past wounds would heal so easily. Aiden looked at her with curious eyes. "Grandma?" he asked quietly. Carol nodded. "I'll think about it," she told her mother. "I'll let you know later." After hanging up, Aiden's eyes shone with anticipation. "Are we going to see Grandpa and Grandma? And Aunt Ashley?" Carol gave a wry smile. Aiden cherished his fond memories with his grandparents. He didn't understand, in his childish mind, that they had supported Jason. "I'll think about it," Carol answered vaguely. After dropping her son off at school, Carol sat in her car, deep in thought. The reconciliation offer seemed too sudden. Why was her family reaching out now, just as her business was becoming successful and gaining recognition? On her way back to the office, she checked Ashley's social media on her smartphone. She noticed words that her sister had posted 3 days ago. "It's time to clean up family issues. Put everything back in its proper place." Carol felt an odd sense of unease about those words. Ashley's posts usually showcased her perfect life. These cryptic words were unlike her. That night, after Aiden went to bed, Carol thought long and hard. Should she attempt reconciliation with her family for her son's sake? Could she overcome the painful past and build a new relationship? The next morning, she made her decision. "Aiden, we're going to spend Thanksgiving at your grandparents' house." Her son's face lit up brightly. Seeing his joy, Carol prayed that her decision was the right one. However, she couldn't shake Ashley's unusual post from her mind. She took a deep breath and told herself, "There's nothing wrong. It's just a family gathering." But deep down, she sensed something ominous about this invitation. In the car heading to her parents' home, Carol glanced at Aiden's excited expression in the rearview mirror. She knew she needed to be prepared for any situation, for his sake. She gripped the steering wheel tightly. Looking up at her parents' house standing in the suburban neighborhood, Carol took a deep breath. The white two-story colonial-style house was where she had grown up. This place, which once gave her comfort, now aroused tension. "Wow! Grandpa's house is so big!" Aiden exclaimed excitedly. Carol smiled. "Yes, it hasn't changed since I was a child." When she rang the doorbell, the door opened immediately. Betty Bradshaw's face spread into an unusually wide smile. "Carol. Aiden. I'm so glad you came." Betty hugged Aiden and, surprisingly, gave Carol a warm hug as well. The scent of her perfume triggered Carol's memories. "Come in. Richard, Carol, and Aiden are here." In the living room, her father Richard stood up to greet them. His posture was still imposing, but his hair had grown whiter. "Well, look who's back, our family's success story," Richard's voice seemed tinged with sarcasm. "And my grandson too." He lifted Aiden up and laughed. "You've grown so much." "Hello, Carol." Turning around, she saw Ashley entering the room. She wore a designer dress and had perfect makeup. Her sister, who usually wore a cool expression, was smiling unnaturally brightly today. "It's been a while," Ashley approached Carol and gave her a light hug. "I saw your company in the news. Quite a success." Carol nodded in agreement, feeling uneasy. Ashley had never sincerely praised her success before. "Let's prepare for Thanksgiving." Betty headed toward the kitchen. "Carol, can you help?" "Of course," Carol answered. But as she tried to enter the kitchen, Ashley blocked her way. "Mom, we'll handle it. Carol should relax since she's just arrived." "You're right," Betty agreed. "Richard, take Aiden to the garden. Show him the new play equipment." Richard put his hand on Aiden's shoulder. "I've set up a basketball hoop for you. Want to try it out?" Aiden's eyes lit up with excitement, and he rushed outside. Carol was left alone. "Would you like something to drink?" Ashley asked. "No, I'm fine," Carol replied. "I'll use the bathroom." She went upstairs toward the second-floor bathroom she had used since childhood. Walking down the hallway, she heard small voices coming from Ashley's room. She stopped. The door was slightly open, and Betty and Ashley were inside. Weren't they supposed to be in the kitchen? "If everything goes according to plan, it will all be over tonight," Betty's voice was heard. "I'm excited just thinking about those two not being in the way anymore," Ashley replied. Carol held her breath. Who were they talking about? Her father's voice echoed from downstairs, and Betty and Ashley interrupted their conversation. Carol quickly escaped to the bathroom. Standing in front of the mirror, she stared at her pale face. Something was wrong. The family's abnormally welcoming attitude, Ashley's sudden kindness, it all felt unnatural. After using the toilet, instead of going back downstairs, she decided to peek into her father's study. The door was slightly open, and when she entered, her father's laptop was left open on the desk. Normally, Richard was a person who strictly managed his work documents and devices. Carol looked at the screen. Jealousy of Success: How to Ruin Your Sister. Seeing that title, Carol felt the blood drain from her face. The document listed plans in bullet points, including phrases like taking over assets and company takeover. Carol. Turning around, she saw Richard standing in the doorway. His face froze in surprise for a moment, but he quickly composed himself. "What are you doing here?" Just feeling nostalgic, Carol feigned calmness. It was always special to enter this room when I was a child. Richard hurried past her and closed the laptop. Yes, it was. Well, dinner is ready. In the dining room, the table was filled with lavish dishes. Turkey, cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie. Everything was perfectly prepared. Please, sit down, Betty urged. Ashley, serve everyone their food. Carol observed quietly. Ashley served from one large pot for her father, mother, and herself. However, for Carol and Aidan, she served from a separate small pot. Special recipe? Carol asked. I made it less seasoned for Aidan, Betty answered immediately. Children don't like strong flavors, right? Aidan was innocently eyeing the turkey. Carol instinctively sensed danger. Aidan, she approached her son and whispered, my stomach hurts, so don't eat too much, okay? Aidan looked puzzled but nodded slightly, seeing his mother's serious expression. It's delicious, Mom, Ashley said as she emptied her plate. Richard nodded in satisfaction. Carol moved the food around on her plate, pretending to eat. Aidan, too, following her instructions, had barely touched his food. Carol, you're not eating much, Betty commented with concern. Are you feeling ill? Just a bit tired, Carol smiled. Work has been busy lately. Grandma, I'm not very hungry either, Aidan said. Carol was relieved at her son's cleverness. How about dessert? Ashley stood up and headed for the kitchen. Special pumpkin pie. Lovely, Carol said. But we'll just have a small piece. She casually reached into her coat pocket to check what she had prepared in advance. A small recorder and her cell phone were there. Carol had decided to bring the recorder a few hours earlier out of a vague anxiety. She was certain now that her judgment had been correct. Ashley returned with the pie. Again, Carol and Aidan's portions were served on separate plates. Let's make a toast, Richard raised a glass of red wine. To family reunion. While everyone clinked glasses, Carol and Aidan were served special apple cider. Carol pretended to touch the glass to her lips. Aidan, watching his mother, did the same. After taking a small bite of the pie, Carol decided it was time to begin her act. She slowly stood up, making a show of swaying. I feel strange. Carol broke off her words and grabbed the edge of the table. Aidan understood her signal and slumped from his chair to the floor. Mom, my head is spinning. Carol collapsed onto the floor as well. She closed her eyes but, while pretending to be completely unconscious, turned on the recorder in her coat's inner pocket. Then she found her son's hand and held it firmly. Aidan. Carol. Betty's voice sounded concerned, but it quickly changed. It worked. A moment of silence filled the room. Carol opened her eyes slightly, observing the situation. Her family's expressions had transformed. The fake concern had vanished from her mother Betty's face, replaced by cold satisfaction. Ashley was laughing quietly, and Richard sank deep into his chair, sighing with relief. Finally, some peace and quiet, Betty's whispered voice echoed in the room. Ashley approached them and peered at Aidan's face. Thank you both for disappearing. Her voice had a friendly tone, as if making a confession. Carol gently squeezed her son's hand and whispered faintly. Don't move yet. Aidan's fingers moved slightly, but he understood his mother's instruction and kept his eyes closed. Richard stood up and took out Carol's wallet. Now the company and assets are ours. If only we had her signature, Betty said. Where are the documents? In the study, Richard answered. But first, we need to decide what to do with these two. Ashley returned from the kitchen with gloves. Let's carry them ourselves. Carol to the master bedroom, Aiden to the guest room. Can't we just leave them as they are? Richard asked. We can't leave evidence, Betty explained. When the police come, they should be found in separate rooms. Carol felt her heart pounding fiercely but tried not to change her expression. She prayed that the recorder she had brought was recording all the conversations. It's time to take over her success. The company, the house, everything is ours now, Betty said with satisfaction. When she betrayed you, I knew this day would come. Since the divorce, she's only been thinking about herself, Richard continued. Even Aiden. We didn't have to involve that child, Betty said somewhat sadly. But he saw too much. He could have been a witness. Carol squeezed her son's hand even tighter. She felt intense regret for having put Aiden in danger. But now, she needed to focus on protecting him. How will we explain it? Ashley asked. Suicide. We'll make it look like suicide due to mental illness, Richard explained. Carol was mentally driven to the edge by work pressure and took her son with her. I've prepared her diary too, Betty said proudly. It shows that she's been mentally unstable for the past few months. Carol nearly trembled with anger but remained still. She was speechless at the depth of her family's betrayal. Is the drug dose enough? Ashley asked worriedly. Enough to kill them? Of course, Betty answered. I specially prepared it from my medication. In 3 hours, it will take effect without leaving any trace. Richard reached out to check Carol's pulse. She continued to pretend to be unconscious. The pulse is weak, but still there. We better hurry. They began to lift Carol and Aiden separately. Carol completely relaxed her body, allowing herself to be carried. As she was carried upstairs by Richard and Betty, Ashley followed behind with Aiden. What about the signature? Ashley asked as they climbed the stairs. I've been practicing, Betty replied. I can perfectly copy her signature. I'll sign the company transfer documents and date them 3 days ago. No one will suspect, Richard said. They'll think Carol became mentally unstable, transferred all her assets to her family, and then took final action. Carol was laid on the bed in the master bedroom. When the door closed, she opened her eyes slightly. There was a small camera installed in the room. It was something she had set up in advance. After confirming she was alone, Carol quickly sprang into action. First, she took out her cell phone from her coat pocket, pressed a pre-programmed number, and sent a text message. Next, she got out of bed and put her ear to the door. She could hear her family's voices from the hallway. After we put Aiden to bed, let's prepare the documents, Betty's voice. Ashley, clean up the kitchen. Don't leave any traces, Richard ordered. Carol took a deep breath. Things were proceeding according to plan, her real plan, which was quite different from what her family thought. She returned to the bed and resumed her unconscious state. Suddenly, sirens wailed outside the house. What at first sounded distant and faint quickly became loud and sharp. The silence of the Bradshaw home was instantly shattered. What's happening? Betty's surprised voice was heard from the hallway. Police. No way. Richard replied. Something must have happened in the neighborhood. But the siren sound stopped in front of the house. Blue and red flashing lights shone through the windows, casting eerie shadows in the room. Police. Open the door, a strong voice resonated from the entrance. Carol jumped out of bed and quickly fixed her hair. Then she looked out the window to check the effect of the text message she had sent earlier. 3 police cars were parked in front of the house. Officers with guns drawn surrounded the house. She headed for the door and unlocked it. In the hallway, Richard and Betty stood rooted to the spot in confusion. Carol. Richard wore an expression of shock. How? Let's go downstairs, Carol said calmly. The police are waiting. What did you do? Betty asked with a trembling voice. Carol didn't answer and opened the guest room door. Aiden was already up, sitting on the edge of the bed. Mom. He rushed to her with a relieved expression. It's okay, Aiden, Carol hugged her son. We're safe now. Downstairs, Ashley was desperately trying to lock the front door. However, under the police's strong pounding, the door was shaking. Open up. Or we'll force it open. What's wrong, Ashley? Carol asked as she descended the stairs. Do you have something to hide? The color drained from Ashley's face. Carol, you. Carol pushed Ashley aside and opened the door. Police officers in uniform entered the house at once. Behind them was a man in a suit. Detective Martin, Carol nodded to the man. Ms. Bradshaw, Martin nodded back. As planned. The officers surrounded Richard, Betty, and Ashley. Their faces showed a mix of fear and confusion. Ms. Carol Bradshaw, one of the uniformed officers asked. As you reported, everything was recorded. Carol took the recorder from her coat pocket. This also contains everything. Their confession and the details of their plan. What is the meaning of this? Richard showed his anger. We haven't done anything. You tried to kill me and Aiden, Carol replied calmly. And you tried to steal my company and assets. Richard's face turned pale. There's no evidence. There is, Carol said. A week ago, after seeing Ashley's suspicious social media post, I consulted with the local police. They said they needed evidence. Carol looked at Detective Martin. So I hired Mr. Martin. He had been watching you for weeks. He knows everything, that Ashley searched for murder methods online, that Betty practiced my signature. And tonight, Carol continued, we set a trap. The recorder I carried and the cameras installed in this house were live streaming everything to the police. They heard your confession and acted immediately. Betty collapsed onto the sofa. Carol, we were just. Just what? Carol's voice was tinged with anger. Just trying to kill your daughter and grandson. The officers began handcuffing Richard, Betty, and Ashley. Richard Bradshaw, Betty Bradshaw, Ashley Bradshaw, you are under arrest on suspicion of attempted murder, conspiracy, and attempted fraud, the officer read them their rights. Aiden stood beside Carol, firmly holding her hand. His eyes reflected fear and confusion. Why? Aiden asked his grandparents. Why did you try to hurt us? Richard didn't answer. Betty was crying, and Ashley stared at the floor. At the police station, Carol and Detective Martin gave a detailed report. Martin produced a file of evidence and submitted it to the police. These are the analysis results of the drugs that the Bradshaw family test purchased, Martin explained. It contained a lethal dose of a powerful psychotropic substance. Carol trembled. Their plan was. They were planning to take over your company, Creative Vision, Martin said. Jealousy and resentment toward what you've built was their motive. Richard was investigating my company's financial situation, Carol understood. He knew I was successful and tried to take it away. And Aiden. Carol's voice choked. He was targeted because he could have been a witness, the police officer said quietly. Is your child okay? He's talking with a counselor. Carol watched Aiden talking with a counselor beyond the door. He's a strong child. But this is. A few days later, Carol was facing a lawyer. Mr. and Mrs. Bradshaw and Ashley have been indicted, the lawyer explained. The evidence is overwhelming. They must prepare for long sentences. Carol gazed out the window. Rain was quietly tapping on the glass. Have they admitted their guilt? No, the lawyer shook his head. They still claim innocence. But the recorded and video evidence is clear. Carol let out a deep sigh. Will I need to appear in court? Yes, the lawyer answered. You are a key witness. A month later, Carol stood calmly at the witness stand in court. Tension filled the courtroom. Richard, Betty, and Ashley sat in the defendant's seats, staring at her. Ms. Carol Bradshaw, the prosecutor asked, why do you think your family tried to kill you? Carol took a deep breath. They didn't hate me. They hated my success. She looked at her family. They couldn't acknowledge what I built with my own strength. And they thought the only way to take it was to eliminate me. The courtroom was silent. Carol's words resonated as heavy but truthful. 1 year later, from the window of her new home in the Boston suburbs, Carol watched Aiden playing in the backyard. He was enjoying basketball with his friends, and their laughter blended into the autumn air. Aiden had turned 12 and grown taller. However, memories of that night occasionally appeared like shadows in his eyes. Coffee? Carol turned around and smiled at Sophia. Sophia was her executive assistant and had become a close friend over the past year. Thank you, Carol took the mug. Are we ready for the meeting? Of course, Sophia replied. All the young entrepreneurs are looking forward to meeting you. Creative Vision had grown even more over the past year, and Carol had launched a mentoring program to support young entrepreneurs. Passing on her experience and knowledge to the next generation had become her new mission. How's Aiden's counseling? Sophia asked, watching the boy through the window. It's getting better, Carol answered. Dr. Reed is amazed at his recovery. Children's resilience is truly remarkable. After the trial, Aiden had been receiving weekly counseling. The betrayal by his grandparents and aunt was a trauma difficult for him to understand. But with time, professional support, and his mother's unwavering love, he was gradually recovering from his wounds. How about you? Sophia asked gently. Carol stared out the window and remained silent for a while. I believe a day will come when I can completely let go of the past, she said quietly. But for now, I want to focus on the new life for Aiden and me. Her former family members are now serving their sentences in separate prisons. Richard and Betty were sentenced to 20 years, and Ashley to 15 years. They never showed remorse, even during the trial. I've learned a lot about what true family means this past year, Carol said. Trust and love are more important than blood ties. The doorbell rang, and the parents of Aiden's friends arrived. Tonight, Carol's house was hosting a Thanksgiving dinner. But this time, she had invited her chosen family, friends, colleagues, and the families of Aiden's friends. Mom, it's about to start. Aiden came running from the backyard. His face was red from exercise, and his eyes were shining brightly. Of course, right away, Carol kissed her son's sweaty forehead. The living room was soon filled with laughter and conversation. Various dishes were spread on the table, and the room was bathed in warm light. Carol paused for a moment to imprint this scene in her heart. Let's make a toast, Carol raised her glass. To new beginnings and the bonds that make us stronger. The sound of glasses clinking echoed in the room, and Carol placed her hand on Aiden's shoulder. Real family are those who protect you, not hurt you, she said quietly to her son. Aiden looked up at his mother and nodded slightly. He understood. In this warm living room, surrounded by smiles and friendship, Carol felt complete peace for the first time. The shadows of the past were fading, and the future ahead was bright. She was beginning to build new traditions with the family she had chosen.